There's Debbie and T and Jackie and Bob and oh, if your Christmas card list is that long, you need help just like I do. So, how you doing? I'm Tim Holtz, Education Director for Ranger, and today I'm going to show you a really cool trick on how to make custom Christmas cards, actually cards for any occasion, using a custom stamp pad. Well, here's what we're going to actually create. It's a Christmas card, and you can see the image has several different colors, but it's one stamping. And the cool thing about this is you can make dozens and dozens of cards from a single stamp pad. So here's how it works. We're going to use a product called Cut and Dry, and Ranger sells two different types of Cut and Dry. There's Cut and Dry Foam, which has a gray backing. It's kind of squishy. You use this for blending or for paint or for pigment inks. What we want for today is our Cut and Dry Felt, and this is completely white core. It's got a fabric on the top. This is basically the same material that we use to make regular die stamp pads, this sort of kind of ink pad. And we're going to make a custom one for our stamp. And here's how it works. We're going to start, again, working on our non-stick craft sheet because we're working with a lot of inks, but we need to work with archival for our first stamping. We need to make sure that the image is stamped with a waterproof ink, and that's going to be archival. So I'm going to choose the stamp that I want to make a custom stamp pad of. It's going to be this one for the card. Make sure it's really nice and inked up well. Then I'm going to take this and make sure that your block is squared up on your piece of Cut and Dry. I'm stamping on the fabric side, so I'm going to line the block up, and I really want to make sure. So if you're stamping with a clear acrylic block, it's going to be a little tougher because you need to make sure that you always position your stamp the same place on the block. So I'm pressing down. Oh, you can see the pressure in my fingertips because this is squishy, so we need to make sure that we really get a nice image. Now, before you lift this off, you're going to take a pen and you're going to draw around the block. That's really, really important step. All right, now we're going to lift this off, and you can see that my image has been transferred onto the fabric. And it doesn't matter that it's not perfect as long as you kind of see what's there. Then I'm going to cut this out on the line, so I make sure that my piece of Cut and Dry is the same size as my stamp block. That's the whole name, Cut and Dry. It's dry pad, we're cutting it apart, and so now I've got a stamp pad or my material the same size as my wood block, and I need to go and clean my stamp. Cut. So once your stamp is cleaned off, you're just going to set it aside, and we're going to work on our pad. Now we need to work with a water-based dye re-inker, and there's several different types. We can work with Distress, or Adirondack is nice as well. I like Distress simply because I like the eyedropper and I like the palette. But I also like Adirondack because it has this little needle tip applicator. So as long as it is a water-based dye ink, you're good to go to make this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start. I'm going to suck some of this ink up. And the whole idea is we're going to color any place that is black. We don't care what is white around here. We just want to worry about our stamped image. So I'm going to start working in a section there. I've gone ahead and inked the tree green. Now the thing about creating one of these custom stamp pads is once you start inking, you have to continue to ink until the entire thing is done. So I'm going to go around here with a little bit of yellow. This is some mustard seed. And notice I just went right around where that area was black. Then I'm going to go in with some fired brick right along the red. Now I've got some white writing, and I don't care that it's there. That's the negative part of the stamp. And if this is your first time doing it, it's a little confusing, but the cool thing is you just ink over everything. Doesn't really matter whether there's writing there or not. Squeeze that up, and you want to make sure that you're dropping it right onto that pad. And you can see that I'm squeezing some of this out, and it's getting soaked right into that material. Because remember, we are making an ink pad, so you need to make sure you put ink in that pad. And you're going to go and continue, and I start working around areas that are going to start touching each other. So when I bring this red right up to this yellow, I'm going right around the edge, just squeezing a little bit out at one time, and then I'll just start filling this in. And you can go around with as many colors as you want until you complete the entire thing. Now I work from colors, so I'll start with my colors first, and then the last color I'll use would be black. So as this gets filled, anything that's going to have black writing, I'm going to do that last because you'll see that this ink starts to bleed into the fabric. And the cool thing about Cut and Dry is once two colors touch each other, they don't actually cross over, so you don't get any contamination. It's kind of a weird thing, but you'll see right here where this yellow and red touches, boom, it stops. So you don't have to worry about this bleeding into the yellow. So black is last because as my ink starts to bleed, I can go and ink over that area in black, and that's going to be the dominant color anyway. So once we have the entire thing inked up, you're going to get something like this. All right, and you can see how these inks really bleed out, but you'll see my color is still there. You see my yellow is where it is, my blues are where that at, green, everything stays the same. And the cool thing is once you make this, you can store it for years and years. Just as long as it's in an airtight bag, you're good to go. So what we're going to do is stamp with it, and here's how we do it. We're just going to take some paper. You can use a tag, you can use whatever. Take your stamp. And this was the key about lining that up, is once we've cut our foam to our block, we just stack these two up and our image is already lined up. So you don't have to see, oh, am I going to make sure I get it or not. Now, again, we need good pressure on this. Stamp it out. Now, because you're making a custom ink pad, you may over ink some areas. That's okay. The key is once you lift this up, you need to kind of tap off some of that extra ink and look at your stamp. Make sure that you have that little shine there. If you see that there's an area that's not shiny, that means there's no ink. So you're going to want to go back and re-ink that. Then you're just going to take it. Oh, good pressure again, because you're making your custom stamp pad. So it just depends on how generous you are with the ink when you make it. Give it good pressure. Lift it off. And voila. And the cool thing is you can continue to stamp these and stamp these and stamp these. Now, here's why I like to use a water-based dye. Areas like this is a distress stamp anyway, but a lot of these images, if you don't like the way they look, you can go in with a wet paintbrush or a water brush, and you can go in and watercolor that right away while that ink is wet and get some really cool shading and toning right onto that image. Just clean it off. So you can blend all your colors, so you can actually make instant watercolor, and you can stamp them all one day and come back and watercolor them the next. Now, a couple other things that I want to show you. You don't always have to use something that's this detailed as far as stamps go. Something like this, very simple seasonal stamp. Make a custom stamp pad. Again, stamped it, just did seasons in red, greetings in green, and now every time I stamp it, there you go. You got your season's greetings. So a lot of possibilities when you do this, and one of the other things I want to show you is in addition to doing your watercolor, stickles is another great thing. You can add some stickles to any card, and not only is that going to add a little sparkle, but it's going to blend your color. So once you have this, again, store it in an airtight bag, and you can use it again and again. You can also mist it with some Perfect Ink Refresher if it seems to dry out ahead of time. You can mist it to kind of rehydrate it. And of course, you can always, at the end of the season, if you decide that you want to start fresh next year, just wash this out. Your image will stay because it is waterproof ink, but all your color will go away and you can re-ink it a whole different palette. So, hope you enjoyed this little tutorial of how to make a cut and dry felt custom stamp pad, and happy holidays.